Hello students, so this is a longitudinal section of a flower. So in today's class, we'll be looking into the sexual reproduction in flowering plants. So here as you see in the diagram, you can see that we have two major, the male reproductive part and the female reproductive part of a flower. So you can see towards the left hand side, you can see the pistil. So pistil comprises of stigma, style and ovary. So this is also called as gynoecium. We call it as gynoecium, which is the female reproductive part of a flower. Towards your right hand side, you can see stamen. So stamen comprises of anther and the filament. So this anther and the filament, it's also called as the androecium, the male reproductive part of a flower. So this is the basic thing which you have to make it very sure. So the remaining parts are the petals and the sepals you can see. So now moving on. The reproductive part of angiosperms. So angiosperms are the flower producing plants are called as angiosperms. So angiosperms are located in the flower. So you have already studied the different parts of the flower. Which are they? They are the sepals, petals, stamens and pistil. Stamens and pistil are the reproductive parts. So stamens we call it as what? Androecium. Pistil we call it as what? Gynoecium. So these are the reproductive parts of a flower which contain the germ cell. So what is the germ cell? The ovary produces the ova. Ova is called the female germ cell. So in the stamen, the anther produces the pollen grains. So that is the male germ cell which has been produced by the flower. So what possible function could the petal and the sepals serve? So that if you come to see in the future parts, so petals actually, they are very colorful. They are red, they are white, they are yellow, they are bright purple and all these colors. So they attract the agents or insects like butterfly, honey bee and all, so that, and animals and birds also, so that they can be the agents of pollination, right? Okay, so sepals actually they help in protecting the ovary after the fertilization. So the flower may be unisexual. So what do you mean unisexual? So single sex. So uni means one sex they have. So something like papaya and watermelon. So when it contains either stamens or pistil. Okay, so that they might have stamens, they might have the pistil or the female part or the male part. So then they are the unisexual flowers. So coming to the other type, so this is bisexual. Bi means two. So they have both the female reproductive part and the male reproductive part. So bisexual examples are hibiscus and mustard. There are many more. So when it contains both stamens and pistil, so that is called as what? Bisexual. If it has only stamen or only pistil, it is called as unisexual. I hope you understood this. So stamen is the male reproductive part and it produces pollen grains that are yellowish in color. You must have seen this yellowish powder kind of a thing, right? When a flower you take it to your hands, okay, and you just touch the anther, you can see the pollen grains, yellowish powder kind of that. So pistil is present in the center of a flower and it is the female reproductive part. So it is made of three parts, which is that stigma, style and ovary. Stigma is a bit sticky. Why? Because the pollen grains has to be attached to that. Okay, so let's move on. So to give a digest of what we read just now, the stamen and pistil are the reproductive parts of a flower. Stamen is the male reproductive part. It produces the pollen grains in the anther which contains the male germ cell or male gamete we can tell. So pistil is the female reproductive part. It produces ovules in the ovary which contain the male germ cell, or we can call it as female gamete, female germ cell and female gamete. So now moving on to the pollination. So the next topic, The transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the flower is called as pollination. So this definition they can ask for 1 mark. So what is pollination? What are the different kinds of pollination? In every paper, most of the papers, repeatedly it's been asked. The transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the flower is called as pollination. So it takes place by the help of wind, water or insects. So if the pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same flower, so then it is called as what? Self-pollination, because it is happening in the same flower. Same pollen grains of that anther will be released to the stigma of the same flower. So then it is called as self-pollination. So moving on to the other type. And if it is transferred, what? The pollen grains are transferred from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower, then it is called as cross pollination. So one flower to another flower may be in the same plant or different kind of a plant. Different means, but still the species has to be same. You can't take a pollen grain of hibiscus and imagine that it can it can help in the pollination of a rose plant. So it should be of the same species. Hibiscus pollen grains on hibiscus stigma. So then the pollination has taken place. You can conclude as such. So pollination takes place by insects, wind and water. So you can see self-pollination and the cross-pollination picture over here. So you can see the butterfly, the honeybees, the birds which come to suck the nectar. So all these help in pollination. So these are called as the agents. So after pollination, what happens? There's formation of the pollen tube. So next what happens? The fusion of male and female gamete and fertilization. Fertilization is also called as what? Syngamy. So this will move to the next part in the next class. Thank you so much for joining. Please do subscribe and encourage.